Today I'm going to work on a jumpsuit pattern out of this book. It's Casual Wear Sewing Patterns for Blythe Doll by little Amelie. And this is the jumpsuit I want to work on. I've got all my pieces cut out. As you can see, there's some of them out of screen here. And if we look through the book, I mean, this book is just great. It's colored photos, step-by-step instructions. You can see every detail. There's tips. These books are really great. And there's a lot of steps to sewing this jumpsuit. And then you have the pattern right after. And this one has patterns for multiple dolls. The Blythe doll, which is the larger one here, the midi doll. And I think that there might be suggestions. Yes, there are. There's more suggestions for other dolls here. So I'm sewing. So with this pattern, there's a lot of moving pieces, as you can see here. We've got the legs, pockets, another pocket, cuffs, collar, and more pockets here. All right, so what I want to start with first, and the reason why I'm showing you this technique, even though the instructions are in the book, is because this is a technique that you may want to add to some of your other projects. So it always helps to learn from what we do with one. We can always apply it to more projects, right? So here, what we're going to do is we're going to have a cuffed sleeve. Let me show you what I mean. And you can see here in the book, right here, it looks like it's folded up. So what they did was they folded the cuff right sides together, and they took the wrong side of the fabric and put it like this. So you're going to sew that, and then I'll show you what to do. All right, let's work on the collar. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our collar piece and we're going to fold it in half. And then you're going to sew on the seam line right up to the edge on both sides. Now we're going to top stitch the collar. So you're going to top stitch very close to the edge as neatly as possible. And so let's put aside our collar pieces since we're done with that and it's nicely top stitched. And we're going to take our back pieces and our front pieces and we're going to sew those together. Now this front piece, as you can see, it's going to have extra fabric for the faux button placket. So we're going to put that towards the center front. So make sure when you're sewing it this way that your armholes are matching with the back piece armholes. I'm just going to pin that Grab the other one and pin that. So see, this longer piece is always going to be towards the middle. Just make sure you don't catch it when you're sewing your shoulder. And whichever pattern you're using, make sure that you're checking periodically your seam allowances. Some of them stay the same on some patterns, some of them change. I'm going to measure mine now so I know what to use. All right, now since this book is written outside of the United States, I'm going to use the CM measurement, which should be under your inches measurement. Because that right there tells me that this is 0.5 cm. So that's what I'm going to go with. Now, top stitch your shoulder seam. Now, we have our back pieces and our front pieces stitched together at the shoulder seams. Now, in order to put our sleeves in, we're going to take one of our sleeves and we're going to hold it upside down. So right side of the fabric to the right side of the fabric. And actually what I should do first is, okay, see this mark here? You're usually going to have this mark in a sleeve pattern, and that just means that that's the center of your sleeve pattern, and that part should match to your shoulder seam. And put it right on the seam. And then what I do is I attached each end, and I might have to clip some of the fabric here to ease in the sleeve. Now that we have the sleeves sewn in, I'm going to go ahead and top stitch the seam line here. Now let's sew our collar piece onto our neckline. Normally when you have a pattern that has a collar to sew onto it, you're going to have a point where they want you to put the end of the collar, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip that. I'm going to match up the pattern piece on the bodice to it, and I'm just going to mark it with my fabric pen. It's very faint, but it's there. I'm going to do the same to the other side. And now, when I'm putting my collar in, I'm going to pin those 2 points first. Now I'm going to pin the rest of my collar piece, and I am going to snip some of the fabric here so that we can fit it. Now sew that collar to the neckline. You can go slowly and adjust your presser foot along the way and your fabric. Now check the underside for any puckers. And here there are none. So at this point, we'll trim those threads. Now what you're going to do is you're going to fold over this leftover fabric here over the collar like that. Now we're going to pin our sleeves together and the back and the front sides and sew that. Actually, let me backtrack a minute. Before you sew the sleeve down, fold in your cuff. So when you turn it inside out, you have the cuff on the outside. So just fold that in, pin it, and then sew it. And here's what it looks like when it's flipped inside out. So now you have the cuff. Let's move on to the next part. So this jumpsuit is going to have pockets in the pants. So we're going to go ahead and match our pockets right side to right side, because that ends up being flipped. You'll sew very close to the edge, a scant seam allowance, and then you're going to flip it over. Now that we have our pockets top stitched, we're going to sew the other part of the pocket on. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to take that next pocket piece, and the sides that are pinned, that's where you will sew. Our next step for this jumper will be to sew the back pants together at the crotch. So we're just going to sew from here to here. And now we will open that up, and we are going to top stitch next to that seam line all the way down. I'm going to press it first, and I'm going to trim off these threads. Our next step will be to sew our front legs to our back legs, and then we're going to top stitch that seam. So make sure that these notches here for the front crotch are facing out. So this is going to be here, because when you flip it over it's going to be facing out, and this one's going to be here. Now this pattern does have back pockets. So what I do when I'm working with back pockets, I always cut this piece out, mark it on the fabric, and then work with my other fabric pieces to put it over the chalk outlining that I do. So I'm going to cut that out now. All right, so I cut out the pocket piece from the back and I marked it on the pants, taking note that the seam allowance where that top stitching is, so I take that into consideration so that it would be placed in the right spot. So now I'm going to work on this super tiny pocket. And what I'm going to do, I'm working with this little pocket pattern. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut where I need to sew, because this is the seam allowance. So I'm going to cut this out and then just sew around where I trace it. Okay, so I'm going to trace that and then sew over this size. All right, I'm going to try cutting that out now. Here is the little pocket. It is tiny. And so we're going to place that. Let me move the camera over. We're going to place that like this, sew across, and then down. So it's going to be like a pocket flap. So we'll press it down, and then I think we'll have to stitch across, and we'll also top stitch that. So I'm going to work on my second pocket piece and probably put some fray check on this so it can stop fraying, and then I'll be back to show you the next step. All right, so here you can see I started figuring out how to place my pocket, and I think that's going to be the perfect placing right there. So this one I had cut a little bit larger because it was just easier to work with. Oh, and I top stitched my pockets. So now I want to make them the same size. So I want to just make sure that they fold up to the same size and then cut off the excess. I don't want one pocket to be larger than the other, even though they are a little bit different shapes, because it was hard to get it exactly the same. Okay, I think that's about right. Yeah, see, one is bigger, slightly bigger than the other. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it and then sew it. I've been using this fabric glue for some of my tinier projects, and it is fantastic. It does have a strong smell though, so if you have a reaction to strong smells, I don't think I would recommend it. Same with the freight check. I didn't realize freight check had a similar strong smell, so if you're sensitive to that, just be warned. Alright, I'm going to work on this a little bit, glue it down, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I think I have the placement that I want. It's not perfect, and I tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist, but this is my first time doing pockets in this manner. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue them down one at a time. I'm going to pin it until it dries. And this here that you see behind it, this is a wool ironing pad, and it's great because you can pin things down, as you can see, and I just leave this here next to my sewing machine because it is just fantastic. All right, I'm going to glue down this one. And that will hold it in place until it dries. And then we'll move on to the next step. So the glue is now dry, and I lifted up the little flap that's not glued down, and I'm just going to sew underneath it to make sure it doesn't pop off, and I'm going to backstitch. And here are my little pockets. And I just have to remove the thread and all that. So this is now what we have. We have two pieces. I'm going to go ahead and press these seams open. And then I'm going to attach with pins the bodice top to the pants, right sides together, like that. So the back part of the bodice to the back part of the pants. All right, so here it is, pinned together, right sides together, and you're going to just sew straight across. And then when you're done doing that, you're going to top stitch the waistline. Okay, I pressed the waistband and now I'm going to top stitch it. Oops, sorry about that. Here's my top stitching. All right, let's move on to our next step. So for this particular pattern, it's telling me in the instructions to fold this back, put a stitch right here, and then fold it back out again, cutting away like this little triangle. Other patterns might do it differently, but this is what this one is telling me to do. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the instructions here, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so now my next step is where I have pinned, I'm going to sew all around on the outside. So starting from here, now we're going to hem. We're going to fold up 0.5 cm and then turn it over again. So I finished hemming the pants and I stitched this part of the crotch right here. I also glued down the pockets and I'm holding those together with pins. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit before I pull together the legs and then sew the whole thing. All right, go ahead and sew here and then put a couple of little snips here at the legs so it can move freely.